Cycle podcast, the podcast that talks you through independent living, functional ability, wheelchairs, mobility, posture, and everything about function. So, powered wheelchair is the NHS getting it wrong. Welcome to today's episode of this Ability Cycle podcast, the podcast that talks you through independent living, functional ability, wheelchairs, mobility, posture, and everything about function. My name is Agada Carlo, and I have with me a good friend of mine and a colleague who will host this podcast together. Please, can you introduce yourself, Mr. Jamie?
Yeah, my name's Jamie Hamilton. I'm an occupational therapist. I've worked in the NHS and local authorities in various different departments and had many years doing wheelchair testing.
Thank you so much, Jamie. So today we are looking at a particular topic of interest because a lot of people have asked me questions about this particular topic, and that is why we are bringing it to talk about it. And it says the manual versus powered wheelchair, is the NHS getting it wrong? You know, this is an open question. We are categorically going to be looking at the manual wheelchairs, the powered wheelchairs, the option, what is obtainable within the NHS, and of course what you can get outside the NHS, and would also be looking at the personal wheelchair budget, a matter of interest. Because one thing I've discovered is most time the type of wheelchair someone starts with, in terms of using a wheelchair, your first wheelchair sometimes would determine how healthy you become or how poor your health can basically progress. So making that first choice of, should I get a powered wheelchair or should I get a manual wheelchair from the start, getting it right is very, very important. Jamie, do you want to say anything around?
I mean, it's one of those things that I've really got a lot of strong opinion about, because I think if you go into a powered wheelchair too early, you do, as you just said, you lose a lot of mobility, a lot of ability, and your dependence on others becomes higher as well. Well, obviously, it all depends on the disability and the person's condition. So there's, that has to be taken into consideration, first of all. But I've seen a lot, I wouldn't say too many, but I've seen a lot of young people, children, being encouraged to go into a powered wheelchair far sooner than what was really healthy for them. And that's children who can manage quite easily with a self-propelled wheelchair. I wouldn't like to guess what the therapists' motives are for that, or the parents' sort of reasoning around getting a wheelchair. But from my own experience, being a wheelchair user from the time of about 5 years old upwards, it allowed me to be far more independent, far more able, and far stronger being in a self-propelling wheelchair than it was being a powered wheelchair. For one thing, I always used to joke when I was a kid, if I went into a powered wheelchair too early, the only muscle that I would actually build is that one there. When you're pushing the button, it's the best way. And I wouldn't try and put those children off, or adults going into a powered wheelchair at the right time. For children who are fairly able and fairly strong and able to move their hands well and have got coordination, there's no reason why they should go into a powered wheelchair.
I strictly agree with you. What you just said is the dynamics of using a wheelchair and all the forces that goes into controlling a wheelchair actually varies from the type of wheelchair. If you're doing the powered mobility, it means it is just the button you'll be pressing, and of course, which means that will be most likely be the only activities you are actively carrying out as long as you are using your wheelchair. Whereas when you use the manual wheelchair, the activity goes beyond the hands, it goes onto the trunks, it goes onto the neck, the shoulder, everywhere. You see, you have more gross motor activities going on the body, and those are what the body needs to encourage muscle growth, flexibility, and of course, things like the release of serotonin, which basically makes you healthier and happier as a person. So yeah, I agree. If someone is clinically able to self-propel, staying in the manual pathway would definitely be the best outcome for that person.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, here and there we see people go into powered wheelchair too early, and of course we know what the outcome is usually. This brings me to something that is very important, which is clinical assessment, because sometimes clinicians struggle to actually certify clinical findings alongside with the needs or perceived or stated need of the family or the actual customer or patient themselves, the disabled person themselves. You know, it becomes important for disabled people to actually listen at some point to what the clinicians are advising, because in situation where a clinician have assessed and the person is sure based on the clinical outcomes that a powered wheelchair is not indicated at that point, I think if the patient or the patient relative is pushing for a powered wheelchair, then they are doing themselves a disservice. What do you think?
I think it should be clinically assessed holistically, not just what's physically wrong with the person, be it a child or adult. Yes, you have to look at the parents or adults' actual needs and wishes as well. But it should be an holistic assessment around how they're going to use it, where they're going to use it, why they're going to use it, and what benefit it is to that child's or sort of function, as well as their bodily functions, their muscle, the tone, everything. And I don't think therapists have enough to give into that. They only have an hour, I think, to do an assessment, and it's just not enough time to work out what that person, unless they're very fast at doing an assessment. So I know if they buy a chair privately, it's a different ball game altogether. And a lot of the time, the child or the child's family or the adult who's using the wheelchair doesn't have that clinical intervention to find out why. But within the NHS, I think there's a little bit of a struggle between what's called the medical model and the social model of disability. A lot of therapists and a lot of doctors and other medics look at ways to treat and cure a person. They don't look at the external aspects of that person's life and needs, which is where the social model comes into play, where the social model believes that it's society and the environment that makes a person disabled. The whole picture is very complicated. Being able to look at the wider aspects of why a person needs a wheelchair and the benefits they're going to get from it, you might actually look at providing a better assessment from that, and ultimately getting the right chair. And I know some parents do think that putting a child into a power chair is best for them because they can move around faster. It's all move around faster and without the need to actually be pushed by anybody else.
I agree with you. It's really an important thing that clinicians adopt the biopsychosocial model of medical practice or assessment in terms of rehabilitation, because when you only look at what is physically wrong or what is impairment the person is having, then most time will end up missing a lot of key information that will be useful. And one thing I think that really works in this approach is the multidisciplinary approach to assessment. There's this platform called Rio. So Rio is more like it provides medical information about a patient from different multidisciplinary teams. So you can read the GP's notes, you can read the physio notes, you can read. So that platform is, I find it very good because before you see a patient, you now have to check that through to just know what other people are saying, what other goals they have, and what the adult social care is, even maybe the outcome of their assessment and what their plans are. This would basically inform you even before meeting the patient, and of course asking the patient about their personal needs, their social needs, their occupational needs, in terms of maybe the person is interested in going back to work, or maybe the person is interested in involving in other social activities like dancing and all of that. So those are things that will, that level of open-minded assessment is what is required to achieve this social input, ensuring that every factor is considered. Because as you said, to be frank, the disability of people who are disabled is actually tied to the environment and social factors they find themselves. If someone have all the support they need to carry out activity, they may live close to someone who is able-bodied, basically. So it's just the level of support they get both from the environment and from the people around them, basically. So which means whether powered wheelchair is being considered or manual wheelchair is being considered, it is very, very important that we put into perspective the need of the person, and as well as the social and environmental factors that could be affecting the person's condition.
Power chairs have moved on a great deal since I was a child, and over the last 5-10 years. So they are much better fitting. They have much better posture seating, and are able to sort of put the person in the wheelchair far more comfortably, and still allow them to be as active as able as possible and independent as possible. But I do think it's about having the power chair at the right time, not putting them into one sooner than needed.
Making those decisions, of course, it's a very complex situation. It's not as simple as it is, because then some people are borderline between powered wheelchair and manual wheelchair. You wouldn't know where to place them. Of course, with critical and well-tailored clinical assessment, you would be able to place them into either power and manual wheelchair. But yes, some people can actually be borderline in such a way that the level of function they actually exhibit and the fluctuation in their presentation may actually make them maybe fitted for both manual and powered wheelchair, and this is an option that doesn't exist. Although most people that have powered wheelchair in the NHS end up getting a manual wheelchair as a backup chair. So I think that is where this comes in. It can also be a situation where the person can use their powered wheelchair and then use the manual wheelchair, but encouraging people to be able to combine these two actively becomes difficult, because most time when they get the powered wheelchair, they just focus on it, and it's only when it is broken down that they now have to fall back on the manual wheelchair. But I think it could actually be very helpful if at some point, if the person is able to self-propel at some point, they should do it. And when the situations changes and they are unable to self-propel, they can actually fall back on the powered wheelchair rather than just focusing on one. Because the fact is, as we've established, the level of benefit that comes with self-propelling is just enormous, that if one can do it, then it's advisable you self-propel.
Yeah. The other thing that's coming into sort of its own, really, the power add-ons that are available now over the last sort of 5 or so years have become much more stable, and there would probably be a good adjunct to a manual chair user, rather than the NHS having to fork out a lot of money for a power chair, because they are extending a lot more money than a manual chair. Maybe a power add-on or in some form might actually be more benefit than putting them into a power chair. in the future, it might be a possible